This table's not big enough for the both of us. Hey Gear Seekers, I'm Nick. Something a little bit exciting, and by a little I mean it's quite small. It's the brand new Phanteks Eclipse P200A. We're gonna do our usual thing. We're gonna thermal test it. We're gonna pull this whole thing apart, and we're gonna show you the ins and outs of this, I think, pretty cool new ITX case from Phanteks. So without further ado, let's jump right in. As usual with these type of videos, we use parts that we have on hand and whatever we can make fit. However, I decided to use some parts that we used in the last ITX build so I can show some thermal comparisons just for your guys' eyeballs to show you something different. Anyways, let's rip this thing apart and see what makes this thing tick. They showed this off a little bit at CES as a bit of a preview, but here is the final retail version. So without further ado, see this here? It says pull here. We're gonna pull off this panel and we're gonna chuck it
in the bin.
Let's continue with the rear panel removal. Same thing, pull here. Don't threaten me with a good time, I'll do it. Right, there we go. Now we've got that off. And while we are at it, we will pull off the front panel as well. That way we can really take a look at everything that's going on here. Here we go, ladies and gents. So I'll quickly show you what makes this case what it is, essentially. You'll notice it's got this fine mesh here. This is the same type of mesh that's on the front panel. So this means you can have fans installed on the side of the case. There's also these little nubs here. These nubs attach the panel to the case so they can clip in. Now, I just wanted to mention as well, before I forgot, there's two versions of this case. There's this one, which is the d-rgb version that has all of the RGB control and everything built in, and there's the performance version, which is significantly cheaper, which I think is going to be very popular for people who don't want TG. You know what I usually do with accessory boxes, Claire? I chuck them
in the bin.
I'm joking, I never throw this stuff in the bin, but let's take a quick look at what we get here. So there's a little panel here for mounting the riser cable to, if you're doing vertical mounting, bunch of zip ties, 21 other screws and doodads. There's also one thumb screw, Claire. You know how good I am at counting? I counted it just by looking at the packet. On the back side here, we've got a cable management raceway that is kind of indented, and you'll also notice that the cable management raceways on this case have screws that hold them in, and it's a little metal bracket. So instead of using Velcro, it's metal. I think this is good because this forces everything down and there's no real wiggle room here. So there's two of these in total. They're thumb screws, but you know, I'm weak, so I don't like using thumb screws with my hands because I can't undo them. I just don't have the clamping pressure of a normal human. For getting your cables inside your P200A, you've got these cable pass-throughs here. They don't need grommets. I always see people say, oh, this case should have had grommets. This one really does not need it, guys. There's also cable pass-throughs along the top here. There's a little support bracket for the power supply up here. And while we're back here, we can talk about SSD mounting. There's two SSD mounts here, and that is a thumb screw that a weakling like me can take out. And this is a panel that can be jiggled and jobbled around to make all of your SSD goodness fit. And just continuing talking about cable management, the raceway continues around to the bottom, so it allows all of the front access to be like managed cleanly and all that jazz. Rightio. You'll also notice there's a bunch of holes and stuff drilled here for some activities, and this is what you can do here. Ready? Wait for it. Unclip these, let them fly. When you pop these off, when we take a bit of a closer look, you'll notice that these also have SSD mounts if you wanted to go down that path, which you won't because you want airflow, which is why this allows you to mount additional fans and stuff to the side here, which I'm gonna cover right now. One of the things that makes this case pretty interesting for an ITX case is the amount of fans you can mount to it. At the front of the case, you can do two 140s. There's these two pre-installed 120 d-rgb fans as well. You can also do some more 120s on the side, and you can also do radiator mounting here. You can do a 240 or a 280 radiator at the front. You've also got 120mm fan mounting at the bottom, and 2 120mm fan mounts on the bottom of the case if you want to use it as intake. So in total, if you really wanted to, and you could do this, you can do 7 fans in this case. Right? Now this case, because your brain is tricking you because you've seen the P400A and the P300A so much, it's actually not that big at all. Not only can you mount like a radiator on the front or whatever, but if you vertically mount your GPU, and this is a requirement, you can put a radiator on the side. And that's the way we're going to be doing it in this video today, when we actually get around to building in this thing. Power supply mounting is standard ATX power supply mounting. It's got these brackets that I always talk about that I really like, that are very handy for loading in power supplies. So 2 thumb screws mounted to the bracket, slide it in. You can take a PSU up to 220 mils from memory. I could be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. I'm actually gonna go SFX with an adapter bracket because I can. In terms of motherboard support, it supports ITX and DTX, and I already know people are going to ask about MATX support. The answer is no, and here's why. It's got this like sunken motherboard type of layout here, and an MATX board would actually fail with that panel right there, so it won't fit. For CPU air cooler support, you're looking at around 160 to 165 millimeters in maximum cooler height for the P200A. In terms of GPU length, 355 is the max. This is the ROG Strix RTX 3090. Obviously, like, you have to feed this in a certain way, but as you can see, this GPU quite easily fits in here. So yeah, this big card. This is one of the biggest ones as well. So if this can fit, almost anything on the market at the moment that you can't buy is gonna fit. What we will be doing in this build though, is we will be doing something that we don't do very often, and we will be vertically mounting the GPU just for something a little bit different and to fill out the case a bit more so you guys can see what it looks in vertical orientation. We don't really do vertical that much anymore because of riser cables, and I'm just gonna hack it for you guys because, you know, I love you guys. Speaking of vertically mounting, this is where it gets interesting. There's a bunch of screws here, and you'll notice that this looks a bit weird for a fan grill. That's because you remove these screws here. If I knew how to use a screwdriver, that would be. And ladies and gents, are you ready? Back to reality. Put that screw in there, put this little panel in whichever way it goes, which is not that way. And you get the other accessory that's in the box that comes with the case, and you screw that into there. Use the Phanteks riser cable, and away you go. You can vertically mount it. Now I'm gonna leave it like this because, as I mentioned, we're doing vertical, baby. We're going vertical, oh yeah. For front IO, it's right down the bottom. You've got your RGB buttons, you've got a combined headphone and microphone jack, USB Type-C, and 2 USB Type-A ports. But not only is this just the front panel, if we pop this off again, this is an integrated RGB controller as well. So there's a bunch of cables that come off this with RGB connectors. The RGB expansion uses this d-rgb connector. This is typically used in Phanteks only and Deepcool RGB products. You've also got a 3-pin connector to expand. So if you want to plug an RGB strip into this, you can do that too. And you have this if you wanted to do motherboard pass-through and use your motherboard or another RGB controller to control all of the lighting. In terms of other front panel stuff, while we're here, you've got your USB 3.0 connector. You've got your USB Type-C connector. There's also the connector for the power button, which after a little bit of research tracing the wire, is labeled reset switch, but guess what? It's actually for the power button. Yeah, that must be just a mistake on my sample. Hopefully other people don't have that problem and sit around confused like I was for about 4 seconds, but yes. There's also SATA or SATA power for all of the lighting control and all the other jazz that's going on the front of the case. The top panel is pretty solid, right? There's no vents or holes or anywhere to mount fans on the top of the case. And I thought I would just add this as a last bit, just for a bit of comparison, because we do get asked about that quite often. This is the Meshlicious Sunny Side Up in white. Now here's a quick side-by-side size comparison. So front on, they're basically about the same height. Now side-on view with this case rotated, as to not obscure the perspective, you can see that if the Meshlicious is laying down, it's a similar length to this case. This, just mind you, like, it's very hard to get the perfect perspective. The height difference here is mainly to do with the power supply. However, the Meshlicious is actually supposed to be that way. And when it's in its proper orientation, you can see that they're about the same height. The P200A is about 1.5 to almost 2 times the internal volume size. I don't have a problem with an ITX case being this size, basically because you can fit so much stuff in it. I would love to see a water-cooled build with this as well, but we're not going to be doing that because we just don't have the time for that right now. Maybe we'll come back to it in the future, but for now, just regular AIO and all that jazz. There you have it, ladies and gents, the P200A. I hope I answered some of the questions that you might have had about this case. There is a bunch of content already out from CES that talked about this with the prototype version, but yeah, this is the final retail version. Other than that reset button being, well, the power button being relabeled as the reset button. Anyways, it's time to do a build, then we're gonna test thermals and all that other jazz. So without further ado, time to actually make this thing look legit. Let's do it. Fun fact, you saw me put the fans on the inside. They can actually go on the outside. I tested, and away we go. You can put them on the outside if that's what you want to do as well. If you've got a radiator on the other side and you want to get some space, Bob's your uncle. All right, let's carry on. Howdy ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the build in the Phanteks P200A. Let's do what we usually do, let's check out the thermals. It's also Bindy's birthday today, so wish her a happy birthday in the comments. So what you're seeing right now with the thermals on screen is, the thermals in this case are pretty good. I was actually quite surprised. Actually, to be honest, there's no surprise. It's an open case with plenty of airflow. The bottom intake, I would recommend definitely doing it. And as you're seeing here, we actually flipped around the fans on the AIO as well to test. Don't do that because it doesn't help the airflow at all, doesn't help your temperatures at all. I always see a lot of people with cases like this with side-mounted radiators flipping the fans around as intake. There's no real point to do that because you're pulling cold air in from the front at 90 degrees and you're exhausting it out straight away. And what you're actually doing is no hot air is getting inside, so you're not raising the ambient temperature inside the case. And because there's an intake at the bottom of this thing with this single fan at the bottom, you can't do two fans on the bottom with this orientation, mind you, that dropped the GPU temperatures considerably. So this is the exact orientation I would recommend doing everything in if you were going for a vertical GPU. Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised with the results from that testing. Anyways, guys, let's chat about the parts. The CPU is the same CPU we used with the ROG Z11 build. It's the 11600K. It's the brand new 11th gen Intel CPU. The motherboard is the Z590i ROG STRIX. To cool the 11600K, we use the brand new Phanteks Glacier One. It's an AIO we've featured a couple times on the channel. Yeah, that's what we use to cool it. The RAM is 16 gigs of Corsair Dominator Platinum RGB at 3600 megahertz from memory. The GPU is the Asus ROG Strix RTX 3090 OC. And as I mentioned when we did the Z11 build, it is a bit mismatched, but it's great for thermal testing. It gives us quite a good understanding of what it's doing for the thermals. Booty go up, booty go up. Butt is all the way up. The power supply is the Cooler Master SFX 850 watt gold power supply, and the cables I use aren't the factory ones. They're a special cable mod kit that Cable Mod makes from the PSU out, and they're very thin cables and they're great for small form factor builds because you can bunch them up really tightly, get them to fit in all kinds of places. I was going to use cable extensions, but because of the size of the case, it would just have added to a unnecessary cable management nightmare, and I think it looks good with these cables anyway. Speaking of, for the lighting, I used the internal RGB controller. I plugged in a deep cool RGB hub, and I plugged all of these Lian Li Unifans into that, and I added an RGB strip, just a random addressable one into the bottom, and the whole lighting scheme you're seeing is controlled from the front panel RGB controller. Yeah, I like using those built-in controllers. It makes life a whole lot easier. I don't have to waste time when I'm testing, setting up lighting or whatnot. So yeah, that's exactly how I did it. Cable management is really, really good. I'm not sure what other people are going to say about it, but I actually had quite a good time building in this case. It was very easy to get everything nice and tight back there. I did use some zip ties to fasten some stuff as well, but using those metal brackets to push the 24-pin power cable down was really, really nice. Not sure how it would be with a full-size PSU and those type of cables, but my experience from the way that we did it was pretty excellent. The build quality and construction is standard Phanteks. It's really good, as it always is. I only had one problem with our sample. One of the RGB cables, well, the one for the power button broke, and I just didn't get around to re-crimping it and re-pinning it. There were a couple weird things at the house to begin with that reset button actually being the power button. But overall, the P200A is pretty excellent. Now, I would have done a bit more of a size comparison had I had an available NR200 from Cooler Master, because I feel like the NR200 is slightly smaller than this and would actually make for quite a good comparison. Like, this case is bigger than your typical, let's not call it a small form factor case, because it's not, it's an ITX case. There's quite a big difference. Now, you probably saw the Meshlicious comparison that I did in the video. That's the only reason why I actually did that is because the Meshlicious, the white one, just basically rocked up and I had it available, and I was like, yeah, let's just quickly show you guys this size comparison. We might come back and actually do NR200 versus Meshlicious versus P200A and just show you all the differences between stuff. We have done those type of videos in the past and you guys really like them and they're quite popular. So we might actually come back and do that because yeah, I find that stuff pretty interesting too. Overall, I think the P200A d-rgb, the version that we've got here, is pretty much on the money for $69 US. I think it's worth it. Given that the NR200 is a similar price to this, yeah, I think this is a pretty good deal. The main difference here being you got more space for storage, there's a lot more room for activities, it's not as finicky as other smaller cases to actually build in, and I like it. I really, really like it. If you want to grab the d-rgb version, as I mentioned, $69, but here's where I reckon the real value is. For people who are going to hide this system away in a corner, you can pick up the performance version without the RGB and the TG for $49 US. That for a small ITX case, pretty banging value if you ask me. Anyways guys, let me know what you think of the P200A, especially the d-rgb version. I think it's great. Like the P400A and the P300A are both really, really good cases. The P360A as well. So my daily driver, like the one that I use to do all of the things that aren't editing, is still in that P360A build that I did a little while ago in the white one. I love that case. The P400A is a really, really good case, but this, as Phanteks' like foray into ITX, this is excellent. I like it. I think it's good value. I don't think you'd be wasting your money at all. And look at that. Just as we finished, the GPU fans spin up. Anyways, guys, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Do all the stuff that you do when you like a video on the internet. If you want to grab the music, it's available over on Patreon. I make all the music. It's only on Gear Seekers and sometimes on Simple Mods because I allow them to use our music. Anyways, guys, I appreciate you very much. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peak, we seek. P200A is excellent. I like it. And please wish Bindi a happy birthday in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.